You're listening to the very first episode of Let the Beat Build, a brand new music production podcast where I, your host, Marcelino VILLALPANDO, interviews music producers and have them walk us through their creative process. I'm excited to introduce our first guest, Common Tiger, and he's going to walk us through his track, Threshold, which is off his EP, The Hero's Journey. But before we hop into the conversation, let's take a listen to some of his music first. So why don't you just introduce yourself to us? Kind of give us a little backstory. How'd you get into production, and how long have you been producing for?
So I've been writing music since I was, I'd say 12, 13 years old. When I think it was my 13th birthday, my mom bought me a bass guitar because I wanted to be in a band with some of my friends. And kind of started out like with an 8-track recorder, recording 8 basses over the top of each other. You know, like, I don't know how I did that, but it ended up sounding cool to me at the time. And then I was in a couple of bands. So I've been writing music for a while, but nothing as intensive as Common Tiger.
Right. So first off, what inspired this track?
Dude, you know, this track kind of came out of a time, I was going through a couple of like part-time job changes and dude, just kind of feeling uninspired. Like I, had done a lot of these breakbeat, like, sampling breakbeats and doing a more DJ Shadow type of vibe. And it was awesome, dude. Like I really resonate with that sound and I still do. But I think that it was like I had made like 100 or 200 of those beats, and I think at some point I was starting to get a little bit like, all right, like I want to be challenged again, And so actually Threshold was a learning process, dude. It was kind of like, all right, well, how can I do something different,
Right. So which element did you start out with first?
Threshold started with a Rhodes sample and going through my library, and I heard like that ding, ding, ding. It had that kind of like, oh man, I could be listening to a record right now and this dude's just kind of jamming out solo. That's what I liked about it. It just had that real organic texture. At the time I was using FL Studio, and so I dropped that into SliceX and was playing around with different arrangements of that and kind of came up with something that was a little bit more drone feeling, where it kind of played the same note but would resample at rhythmic times. And I built the drums around that. So when I was doing the drums, I recorded the kick and snare separate. So, it started out with that kick. I would, be playing the kick pattern while I was recording with my right hand and then kind of like slapping my knee where the snare would be. Then go back afterwards and record the snare. That is a hi-hat loop that I found within my drum library. I was like, put it in there and it sounded dope. When I was working on it, I was trying to think of things like, how can I make this a little more interesting, different, maybe pique people's interest a little bit more. I reversed it, threw it on top of the kick snare pattern I had, and I was like, oh, this is cool. At that point, for me, it just felt like, okay, this is an area where I want to create a lot of energy, and I just want people to feel it, and so that's when I decided to bring in the bass. Some guys have bass going out throughout the song. I actually will typically leave the bass instrument out of the rest of the song except for the drop chorus sections. It just makes it feel bigger. People feel like, oh man. So the other element that I was going to mention, this element came after the 808, the kick, and snare were all laid down, and that is those metallic guitar sounds that you hear. for me, it's like I don't really ever know what I'm looking for until I'm creating. So, and I don't think I consciously knew at the moment, like, man, it would be really cool to have a more like distorted, edgy guitar sound here. You know, that grindy chord sound worked really well, kind of filling it out, creating more of like a raw vibe to it. It's the same synth, but what I did was I changed the chords that I was using. I'm just holding notes on that and then let them ring out. They actually come out of Rev. That's like the reverse output plugin. I think that they did a really good job on that. A lot of the stuff sounds super organic, and there's just so much you can do with it. It just feels like kind of like an infinite plugin to me as far as how it can be used. Really on that track, actually, I remember this clearly. I had laid out those metallic guitar typist chords, and I kept listening to it. I was like, man, there's just something missing. You know, I didn't know what, but it just didn't, like, I don't know how it is for other people, but for me, it's like I'll be working on something, and it just doesn't, it's not there yet, and you can feel it in your gut when it is. And for some reason, I was just like, man, I don't know what this is missing. And so I kind of took a step back and actually was playing around and opened up Contact 5 and Exhale and opened up a patch on there, you know, and then I found that patch that you hear, the So then you have the lower one in there, and that's actually a transposed version of the higher one. And I just took it and resampled it. And that vocal section that you're hearing, like, what that is I took the Exhale patch that I used on the drop, took that and then resampled it. When I'm creating, there's not a whole lot of thinking going on. And I know that sounds like counterintuitive, but for me, it's like, you know, just like a painter, you know, they do have somewhat of a goal in mind, but they're not overthinking it. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of letting these thoughts and emotions come out and playing with things and really just tweaking things, carving things until it fits. I think I probably played around with that, trying to find the arrangement I wanted, at least 20, 30 minutes, you know, and eventually kind of settled on this. So I added that as the last thing. I was saying earlier is that, yeah, the beat just kind of didn't feel complete to me. You know, I don't know what it was. I was listening to it. I had the guitar sound. I had the 808. I had the kick. I had the hi-hat. But there was just something that was missing. And that's what, at that point, I was like, oh, now it feels like a complete, you know, section to me. At that point is when I was like happy with it.
When did you know that Threshold was a keeper?
Working on the song, you know, kind of grinding at it, playing around with different ideas. I bounced down a basic version to my cell phone, and it was like my wife had texted me at like 5:30, and that's when she's off. She's like, I'm off. And so I was like, shit. So I threw this on my phone, and I went and picked her up, and I had Threshold playing or had started it over for her. And I didn't really think much of it, but she lit right up. She's like, oh, this is really cool. You know, got super excited about it. And that was kind of a moment where I was like, oh, shit, there's something to this. And that was really kind of like, it's a keeper, you know? And we always joke, you know, there's the wife test. And does it pass the wife test? And that's good, man. If you have someone super close to you that you trust, whether it's your wife, your best friend, your boyfriend, whatever, that can just be honest like that, you know? And you can usually tell, like, you don't need to like even like, well, what do you think? Do you like it? You'll be able to tell. Did they smile? Are they like laughing? Did they like, oh, I like this? That's usually a good sign.
Right.
So the wife test.
The wife test is crucial. I have a wife, and she's super honest. She doesn't care about hurting my feelings. She'll tell me if she likes it or she doesn't.
Don't you just love wives?
She doesn't care if I just spent 9 hours on it, you know? She don't care.
Doesn't care if you cry. Doesn't care if you're just bleeding out of your eyeballs. Oh, this sucks.
Right. But yeah, you gotta love it. You need somebody like that. So how would you describe your sound or categorize your music?
I would say it's like, if you were to take boom bap, like hip hop, like if you were to like take the drums from that, mix it with modern day ambient chill, and mix that with indie, like an indie Northwest Portland, Seattle type rock vibe, you'd probably get what you're hearing. And if you want something a little more in alignment with like the whole hero's journey, like trip hop, chill, electronic.
Who are some of your production influences?
Production influences. All right, here we go. I'm a huge Gold Panda fan. Gold Panda and Tycho opened up the door to, I guess it was like one-man production. You know, that means I'm not working with a band to create the sound. Like, and before that, I had been working with a band called Rhodes up in Portland, playing shows and stuff. And I heard Gold Panda and Tycho, and that was the beginning of the end of having to say, where's the drummer and all that, you know, like, and that was always the thing. It was so frustrating because, you know, like you said, like I like to grind. I like to get in there, work on stuff, get a project done. And so anyways, in a nutshell, having to wait on other people could be frustrating. Yeah, I mean, obviously Jay Dilla, but Jay Dilla now too he was kind of later on in that lineage where I started like looking at like, well, how Gold Panda was sampling and, you know, how he was triggering things and cutting sounds. And then being, you know, kind of coming back and like, oh, Jay Dilla, and learning about what he did and being inspired by Jay Dilla's passion and drive for the art and the craft and seeing, and that's, you know, I love Jay Dilla's stuff. I enjoy it a lot, but really I'm drawn towards his passion and drive and dedication to making music. And that inspires me a lot. And he's probably the most influential person on me when it comes to being inspired by a producer.
I know a lot of producers who are super influenced by Jay Dilla.
Yeah.
He's had a lasting effect. Rest in peace.
And one more thing I want to add on the Jay Dilla thing. The thing about this too is it's just like anybody that's passed away, you know, people pass away and it's easy to project certain ideas, thoughts, themes on those people. And maybe they weren't even about that. So truth is, like, I've projected this idea and image on Jay Dilla, and really it's just like, I think that I needed that, maybe that push and that energy of like, that's what he was about. Like, if he could do it, I could do it. Maybe that had nothing to do with him. So I keep that in mind as well. But the truth is, it's good to just like, at least I can imagine that. So
what do you turn to for inspiration in regards to art?
That's a good question. I mean, I definitely turn to like nature and like hiking, meditation, like mindfulness. I get a lot actually of ideas and like inspiration from being mindful just in my everyday like experience. Like even if it's going to my day job and typing on the computer or like walking from the car to work, really simple stuff actually. And it's like, it's crazy. It's like as soon as I like kind of hunker down into the moment and let go of all the other noise, it's interesting that I get these ideas that come to me kind of out of the blue. And I can't really force it. It's been stressful sometimes where I'm like, okay, I got to work on this project. I got to figure out the art for it. And what is the message? And it just feels very manufactured. I get sometimes you got to do that and buckle down and create a product. But, you know, it's like, I'm an artist. I'm doing this because I love doing it. And I want to create something that is beneficial for people that listen to it. And so there's no rush. So I can just hunker down and wait till a really inspiring idea or inspiring emotion, whatever you want to call it, comes to me. So that's where I'm at with that.
That's awesome. That's definitely a vibe that comes through with your music and just the overall brand. From the very first time I heard one of your tracks, I got a very spiritual vibe from the music. And I remember reading on your SoundCloud, you had once that you lived in a Zen temple.
Yes.
How did that affect your music? Or I'm assuming that's where you learned your mindfulness from?
Yeah, it's definitely a part of it, man. And yeah, I think the experience at the temple, it was one of the more intense experiences I've had. It's really kind of hard to put into words, but the best way I can put it is you're in an environment where everybody is like focusing intensely on the moment, and that creates a certain palpable energy, especially if you're kind of doing the same thing. And it can put you in touch with some emotions you don't want to be in touch with, some feelings and thoughts that you would rather not deal with. And I think at that point in where I was at with meditation, it wasn't like I was unfamiliar with that experience. I had been meditating and practicing mindfulness for, I think, 4 or 5 years up until that point. But then living there, it was definitely like the pinnacle of that experience. And I think, yeah, it definitely plays an important part in my music because, when I sit down and write a track or I'm working on something, really, it's like I just my intention is to create awesome music and to allow that creative energy to flow and see what happens. And so like I sit down without too many thoughts about what's going to happen next. And it's kind of actually a meditation practice for me. I've never really thought about that, but I'm sitting down and I'm working on something. It's very much the same mindset as a meditation where you're just focusing on what you're doing right in that moment and everything else drops away. So that's definitely the connection there, I'd say.
That's awesome. Do you remember the moment that you realized you wanted to pursue music production for a living?
2014. At the time, and even currently, I live in a Greyhound bus that was converted into a living space, and it was like, gross and moldy and wet and had all these issues. And I started fixing it up, had my computer and a couple guitars, and it was really cool just being left alone with my own devices, I guess you could call it, and started making music. I'd stay up all night working on a song, and I could do that. There was no restrictions. I was in this bus, no roommates to tell me whatever. And that was definitely like a moment where I started to realize like, man, there's something to this. There's a reason why I get in this state, this mindset where I can keep creating for hours on end. And if at that moment I would have thought, well, I don't have a professional studio and I don't have this and I don't have that, and I just would have nipped it in the bud, well, then none of this stuff or success, if you want to call it, the success that I have had, would have happened. And all the songs I've done have been made in a old bus that's not moldy anymore. And, it's like, and it's just, I hope if anybody like hears that and they could get inspired and realize like, dude, you don't need the most expensive studio in the world. You don't need the most expensive anything. Just like, practice your craft, create, and put your heart into it. There's no guarantee either that, you're going to have quote unquote success, but, I think the success kind of comes down to doing something that you love. And that's, if that's it and you just felt really good in the moment creating something, that's better than a lot of people, man. So I'd say do it.
I agree. So where does Common Tiger go from here?
I like this question because it's like where I've been at kind of currently. But, where do I go from here? I'd say I'm just going to keep creating, keep practicing, keep resonating with what feels good to me in music, and recording it and sharing it when it's the right time. That's like kind of the ultimate goal, is just to keep doing it and I guess practice it as a lifelong craft and see, like what kind of art could I create after like even 10 years of like intense practice, like what would you make at that point? And I think I just love that. And I like the idea of mastery. I like approaching like anything I do. Well, not anything, but if I care about it with a sense of mastery, like, okay, there's gonna be days where I fail. Maybe the song comes out, nobody likes it, doesn't do shit, whatever. But the fact is like, I'm in here to practice and get better every time I do it. And I don't know, man, that's really my ultimate goal. I say in the near future, you're gonna see a couple remixes and a new album, or EP rather, coming out the second half of 2018.
I love how you touch on it's just so big, the whole mastery.
Yeah.
People are just so driven by the short-term success, the instant gratification.
Oh, for sure, dude. Like I can understand it, because like, okay, so, a couple of the releases like Fly or Round and Round getting on Majestic Casual, that was like hitting the fucking jackpot. Like that's like, for some people it wouldn't matter, but for an artist like me, it's like, holy shit, we hit the $100,000 jackpot on the, machine, and you get this huge rush and you're like, it's a great feeling, but the thing is, it doesn't last. 3 months down the road, 4 months down the road, I was like, oh, okay, well, what's next? I suck, and you have that same mindset. So it's like, it just doesn't sustain me to like, I'm excited as hell about it. I'll tell you that right now. But the other thing is like, I'm trying to develop the mindset of just feeling like successful just by doing it, You're more the mindset of just kind of like showing up, right? Showing up, man. Showing up and like keep doing it. Who knows what'll happen?
Well, Common Tiger, thanks for showing up today.
No problem, dude. Thanks for putting this on.
My pleasure. I think we should listen to the full arrangement of Threshold. So let's do that now. Why don't you tell people where we can find your music at?
You can find me at commontiger.net. That's like my little blog website, and there's a bunch of links on there. Soundcloud.com/common-tiger.
I want to thank Common Tiger for being our very first guest and giving us a glimpse of the man behind the music. I also want to thank you, the listener, for spending your time with us. You could have been anywhere else in this world, but you're here with us, and I appreciate that. If you enjoyed today's episode of Let the Beat Build, please feel free to share it with your friends and subscribe so you can stay caught up with all future episodes. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm your host, Marcelino Villalpando, and this is Let the Beat Build. Until next time, peace.